Every system of secrecy runs on the same fuel: leverage. It survives because the people closest to the truth have too much to lose by telling it. So, what happens when there's an entire generation with nothing left to lose? That's the question that nobody running disclosure is asking, and it should be one of the first ones. Look at who's actually in charge of disclosure: the representatives in Congress and the military officials controlling the information. It doesn't matter whether they support disclosure or claim it needs to stay classified. They almost all have one thing in common: they're older. Okay, that matters because for most of them, the system has worked. Nearly 70% of senators are over age 60, and somewhere between 73 and 82% of all senators are millionaires. The system worked for them. They might agree it needs a little tweaking, but overall it works. And that's exactly why disclosure is such a threat, because real economic shakeup would follow it. Business models collapsing, pension funds and institutional investors taking a hit, oil destabilized, the entire financial system would be thrown into chaos. I might get into the defense sector in a separate video, but if you haven't realized, endless wars are deliberate wealth transfer from the lower and middle classes to the rich, you haven't been paying attention. And it's not just the ultra wealthy who resist the collapse. Plenty of older people outside the upper class would too. They're almost done paying off their mortgages. They've got IRAs. They might actually live to collect Social Security. Everything they spent decades planning for could vanish overnight. So, the safest bet, from their point of view, is to keep everything exactly the way it is. They have too much to lose. But that's not the world young adults live in. And here I'm counting everyone between 35 and 40 years old and under as young adults. College costs have tripled since 1980, while at the same time, real starting salaries for new grads have actually gone down. If you're under 35 and earning the median for that age group, around 55,000, buying the average home would cost you 7 to 9 times your annual salary. Even with a working spouse, most couples would be stretched thin. Of course, it's worse for anyone with only a high school diploma. A lot of people look at their future and see nothing but debt. So these younger people have nothing to lose. What happens when they're willing to risk everything? The question matters because leverage is the whole game. A pension that can be clawed back, a clearance that can be revoked, a career, a reputation, a retirement account tied to the same defense contractors and energy companies that disclosure would bankrupt. That's the leash. It worked for 60 years because the people closest to the truth have also had the most to lose by telling it. But that leash doesn't hold on somebody already priced out of a home, buried in student debt, and staring down a retirement that increasingly looks like a fantasy. A young analyst or officer with access to classified programs isn't weighing, leak this and lose my pension, the same way that a 58-year-old, just 2 years from retirement is, because that 20 or 30 something doesn't believe the pension will be there anyway. Career ruin loses its teeth when you never expect that career to pay off. And it's not just the people on the inside. The same leash was supposed to hold the public too. You're supposed to stay patient and trust in institutions because you have a stake in keeping things stable. That assumption doesn't hold for a generation locked out of economic stability. A 27-year-old with 6 figures of debt and no path to owning a home isn't invested in propping up business models or pension funds that they'll never benefit from. They're not going to protect a system that doesn't protect them. So the old guard has too much to lose to ever tell the truth. And for the first time, there's a generation coming up with nothing left to lose, which means the people who've controlled the secret for 60 years are more exposed than they've ever been. Whether that looks like a whistleblower finally deciding it's worth it, or a younger generation that simply stops staying quiet. The people holding the secret should be paying closer attention to who's coming up behind them. And that's exactly why my book series, The Disclosure Files, centers on many characters who are older teens or are in their 20s. It's a look at what happens when leverage runs out, when an entire generation with nothing left to lose decides the truth is worth the risk. Link is in the bio.